evening, everybody, and welcome to our second annual Skinner Middle School Debate Competition. My name is Nate Braidman. I will be your Master of Ceremonies. Let me explain a little bit to our audience members what we've been doing throughout the year and explain the methodology and the content that we have been studying. What we do, what we abide by, our company, is we believe the best way to master knowledge is to go through a crawl, walk, run strategy. So what we do is in order to master a certain topic, we have the kids memorize certain basic facts. That's the crawl stage, and then we have them draw conclusions from those facts. That is the walk stage, and then we have them develop a persuasive argument and debate and counterpoints, and that is the run stage. For the last 9 months, the students have been studying 5 of the most important decisions that were made in the last 100 years. So we're going to start off with appeasement, and now we will turn most importantly to who. So let me introduce our teams. On my left, immediate left, is Miss Annalisa Montoya, and she's the subject matter expert for appeasement. Next, Miss Aspen Coates, and she is going to be covering the Korean War. Next is Alan Cisneros, and he is the expert on the Cuban Missile Crisis, followed by Daniel Brown. He'll be covering the end of the Cold War, and our cleanup hitter is Mr. Owen Smith, who will be talking all things Iraq. Their competition. On my right, we begin with Mr. Calder McCarthy. He will be debating the appeasement section. Next, Miss Marissa Lucero will be covering the Korean War, followed by Miss Alondra Gil Gonzalez, and she will be taking the Cuban Missile Crisis. AJ Sanchez will be our end of Cold War expert, and our cleanup hitter on this team is Mr. Hayden Breitzman. So he will be debating Mr. Smith on the Iraq War. So let's begin with our lightning round drill. What I do is I will ask them questions, and they will have to answer as many as they can correctly in 1 minute for 1 point each. And in case I forgot, let me just say that there is a $1,500 cash prize to the winning team to be awarded at the end of the broadcast. So, Mr. McCarthy, we're going to begin with you. Are you ready?
Yes.
For 1 minute. He became Chancellor of Germany in January 1933. Hitler. The German word for intuition.
A fool.
The peace treaty that ended World War I.
The Versailles Treaty.
The approximate cost of Germany.
31 billion.
The British politician repeatedly called for European nation to resist Hitler.
Winston Churchill.
In 1934, they swore a personal oath of allegiance to. Correct. Define orator.
Speaker.
Germany was forbidden to have one of these after World War I.
Air Force.
Germany's army was limited to this size after World War I.
100,000.
Define reparations.
Repayments.
This resolution would have required a national referendum to declare war.
Pass.
Define confiscated.
Taken away from.
Germany annexed this country in 1938.
Czechoslovakia.
This British leader caved into Hitler's demands in Munich in 1938.
Pass.
The year World War II began.
39.
World War II began when
Poland.
Germany. Define frenzy.
Pass.
Okay, not bad. Now we're going to start with Miss Montoya, and we're going to start where Calder left off, Annalisa. So there were a couple of that he missed, so I'm going to start. We'll keep that screen where it is, and I'm going to ask you to, Annalisa, are you ready to begin?
Yeah.
Okay. This resolution would have required a national referendum to declare war.
The Laszlo resolution?
Okay. Germany annexed this country in 1938.
Austria?
This German leader caved into Hitler's demands at Munich in 1938.
Neville Chamberlain?
Define frenzy.
A wild excitement?
The only institution authorized by the Constitution to declare war.
The Congress?
This legislation authorized the construction of 120 warships.
Pass.
Hitler wanted to absorb the parts of this country that contained ethnic Germans.
Poland?
Define impeccable.
Better than everything else.
Define obsolete.
It's useless.
After gobbling up Czechoslovakia, Hitler turned his attention to this port city in Poland.
Danzig?
The foreign policy of the United States in the 1930s.
Isolationism?
This country signed a non-aggression treaty with Germany in August 1939.
Russia?
Okay, very good. All right. Next, we will move on to our what if section. So now that they have mastered their facts, they're going to draw some conclusions from it. So, our first question is to Mr. McCarthy. What if Britain and France had stood up to Hitler's aggression in 1938? What would have been the most likely consequences? So the first thing I want to ask you is, what was Hitler demanding to keep the peace in 1938?
He was demanding that parts of Czechoslovakia were taken up and put into Germany.
Okay. What city did they meet in to discuss this situation?
Munich.
What solution did they come up with?
That parts of Czechoslovakia would be dissolved and put into Germany.
Okay. Okay. If the British and French had stood up to Hitler, what would have happened?
They would have taken over Germany, and they would have stopped World War II from happening.
Okay. All right. Next, we will move on to our what if section, in which the students will take the basic facts and draw conclusions from them. So we'll start with Mr. McCarthy and his what if question. So, what if Britain and France had stood up to Hitler's aggression in 1938? What would have been the most likely consequences? So, tell me, Calder, what was Hitler demanding to keep the peace?
He was demanding that parts of Czechoslovakia be dissolved and put into Germany.
Okay. What city did they meet in to discuss this situation?
Munich.
What solution did they come up with?
They came up with the solution that parts of Czechoslovakia would be dissolved and put into Germany.
Okay. And if the British and French had stood up to Hitler, what would have happened?
World War II would never have happened.
And what would have happened, right, okay, as a result. Okay, good. Now, Annalisa, you've got your why question. Why did Churchill's warnings about the Nazis fall on deaf ears in 1930s Britain? What made the British and French leaders so afraid? So first question I'll ask you is, why were they so willing to give Hitler what he wanted?
Because he used rhetoric, so it made it look like what he wanted was for the good of the people, but it wasn't, because he didn't want peace, he wanted war.
Okay, what were they afraid of, the British and French leaders?
Another world war.
Okay, can you name two consequences of World War I that they were afraid of?
England lost 3% of their population, so they had to pay orphans and widows money, so it had an effect on their economy and didn't have enough money for things like their army.
Okay, and why was this policy of appeasement mistaken?
Because Hitler didn't want peace, he wanted war.
And how did collective security work? What did Churchill have in mind when he spoke of collective security to stop the Nazis?
He wanted to get people together so he could close up on the Nazis and Hitler, so they would just break down on by themselves.
Okay. Now we'll go to our debate, and our judge, this is his cue to cover our debate here, and that is, the actual topic is, are there certain governments we can never make peace with because of our irreconcilable differences? So Calder says yes, some governments are so alien to our ideals that they can only be fought on the battlefield. Annalise is going to say no, we should try to make peace whenever the opportunity arises. Now, as you know, as I mentioned before, you have 5 minutes in which to come up with an opening statement. This is the only time you can confer with your colleagues. So come up with an opening statement. You'll have 2 minutes to deliver that opening statement, but by all means write your opening statement down, and then I will time you starting 5 minutes right now.
I like editing.
I like the Photoshop.
I like that I am a student.
I really just enjoy everything we're learning.
Hands-on experience.
Fun and entertaining.
Filming a lot of cool stuff.
Home atmosphere.
It's a class worth taking.
Are you ready? Okay. Now you will have 2 minutes, Calder, to deliver your opening statement. You can begin now.
All right. I believe that some governments are too alien to our ways of life in America, that there's no possible way that we can ally or make a treaty with them. Like Nazi Germany, Russia, North Korea, they're all very unpredictable, and even if we make a treaty with them, there's no telling that they won't wage complete war on us and just turn on us. In World War II, when we weren't allied with Japan, but we also weren't enemies with Japan, then they just came out and they blew up Pearl Harbor without telling anyone, that can't happen again, because if we let that happen, then we are endangering the lives of many U.S. citizens and Army men. Some countries also don't want peace, and there's no possible way that we can work with them to try to get a treaty, and they're just very unpredictable and alien to our government, ISIS. They do public executions and killings and mass bombings and suicide bombings, and a lot of stuff that cannot happen in American society. And if we try to ally with them, there's nothing saying that they won't retaliate on us and attack us. And even if we're not allied with them, and we're not enemies, they're still so unpredictable that they can attack us at any time, and we wouldn't. The only thing stopping them from that would be our defense systems.
Okay, with 8 seconds to spare. Now, Annalisa, we go to you. You're arguing the opposite. You're saying, no, we should try to make peace whenever the opportunity arises. You have 2 minutes to deliver your opening statement, beginning now.
I believe that we should try to make peace whenever the opportunity arises, because war is too costly on us, and there's too many casualties for America. And to avoid things like Calder said, like them turning on us, or like when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, we can just use collective security like Winston Churchill wanted to, and it'll have them collapse on their own, and it'll avoid us having to use hard power, and such as war. When we don't go to war and try to make peace with them, or not peace, but use collective security, it saves our economy. And if we say that some countries are too alien to be at peace with us, then that's just going to make them even more mad, and everyone would be at each other's throats. Like other countries' allies would come to war with us because of their allies, and then our allies would be going to war with them, and then everyone would be fighting each other, and then everyone's economy would go down. So we should compromise some things that we do in order to avoid casualties for everyone.
Okay. And I thought it was the Germans who bombed Pearl Harbor. Sorry.
What?
Old joke from an old movie. Okay, shows how old I am. All right, so Judge, that point you can score the opening statements, and we will move on to the counterpoint, which I will deliver. And Mr. McCarthy has 1 minute to respond to me, and this is where he's got to think on his feet. So, Calder.
Yes.
Isn't it better to have a running dialogue with Iran instead of constant tension? You've mentioned that there are some regimes that are irreconcilable with our values as Americans, but shouldn't we, even if though they are enemies, shouldn't we have a running dialogue with them just to avoid any misunderstanding, especially if it's between nuclear powers such as the United States and soon to be Iran? You have 1 minute to respond.
Maybe having a running dialogue could be helpful, but if we're having a running dialogue with countries such as Iran or North Korea or Russia, they're so unpredictable that we can't know that they may be doing stuff behind our backs, like planning attacks or invasions or nuclear strikes, and we will never really know for sure what they're doing.
Okay, Annalisa, what he just said, you have to rebut that. So is there anything you would like to say in response to that? For 1 minute.
So
What do you think of what he said?
if they feel like we trust them enough to have like communication with them, then, and if we tell them things like that we might do like to other countries, then it'll make them more open to not do things behind our back. And even if they're unpredictable, I mean, we can see some things that they're doing, like our technology is really good and stuff.
Okay, so Judge, that was Annalisa's rebuttal. And now, Annalise, I'll provide a counterpoint to you. So you say we should try to make peace whenever the opportunity arises, and that we don't have to be enemies, but we don't have to be allies, but we don't necessarily have to be enemies. So let me ask you this. A country like North Korea clearly has a government that is radically different from ours. The information is that the average North Korean is in fact 2 inches shorter than the average South Korean because the system they lived under for 7 years has kept them malnourished and impoverished, and they have no free press, and they've been a constant threat to our South Korean ally. So how on earth can we ever make peace with a regime like North Korea? You have 1 minute to respond, starting now.
We don't have to make peace with them. We can use collective security like Winston Churchill wanted to do, and that'll just make their government like collapse on its own instead of us using hard power, and then it'll be peace because we didn't do anything to them.
Okay. Calder, 1 minute to provide a rebuttal. Is she right?
Well,
You have 1 minute starting now.
maybe if we didn't do anything to them, even if we didn't do anything to them, then they still might not like us. Because a lot of countries have religious beliefs that are opposing people who don't believe the same or who don't practice the same religion that they are. So because of that, they might just think that, oh, all these people don't practice the same religion as them. Screw them. Let's just attack all of them, and then just go and attack all of them, and wage war on us. And then even if we're not enemies with them, there's still nothing stopping them from doing that. Even if we're allies with them, they can still. Governments that are that radical will still do radical things.
All right, good first round, guys. Let's move on to our next topic. So, Judge Calder's rebuttal, and Grant, you can take 5 because we won't need you until the next. I'll cue you again for the Korean War. Now, we move on to the Korean War and the decision-making that took place there with regards to General Douglas MacArthur. So, Ms. Coates, are you ready for your lightning round? You have 1 minute to answer as many questions as possible for 1 point each, beginning now. What year did the Korean War start?
1950.
Americans turned the tide of war. True or false?
True.
The war began when they invaded South Korea.
No, North Korea.
Name one advantage of the Incheon landing.
It was unexpected.
What does DMZ stand for?
Demilitarized zone.
Which country intervened in Korea when U.S. forces began to win?
China.
Why did President Truman want to limit the Korean War?
He didn't want to have a further war with China.
The river separating China and North Korea.
The Yalu River.
Define lunged.
Thrust forward.
Who relieved General MacArthur of command?
President Truman.
Define sanctuary.
Safe haven.
What year did the Korean War end?
1953.
What did MacArthur want from the Korean War?
Absolute victory.
The capital of South Korea.
Seoul.
True or false, the Korean War was the first time troops
True.
fought? How badly were some American
10 to
units?
1.
Okay. The current leader of North Korea?
Kim Jong-un.
Okay. Very good. So now we will continue with that, and then we actually have in anticipation that they would hit it out of the park in some cases, we have some extra bonus questions that do come from the unit we had that were the vocabulary. So we'll go back to that slide, and we will pick up with you, Marissa. You will have 1 minute starting right now. Name one disadvantage.
20 miles from the enemy line.
What principle was reinforced by Truman's relief of MacArthur?
Pass.
Define vindicated.
Pass.
American forces were driven back to this perimeter at the beginning of the war.
Pusan perimeter.
This unit spearheaded the Incheon landing.
Marines.
Name one measure MacArthur wanted to take the carry to war into China.
Pass.
What line was Korea eventually divided along?
30th parallel.
Define agitated. Define paramount.
Most important.
Define ominous.
Threatening.
Okay, next slide, please. The capital of China? The capital of Japan?
I don't know what to talk
Define vengeance.
Pass.
Define escalating.
Moving forward.
Define chaotic.
Crazy.
For Marissa, What if the United States had not intervened in Korea? What would the country look like now? So my first question to you, Marissa, is why did we intervene in Korea?
So we didn't have another war.
And give me two consequences that would have happened if we had not intervened in Korea.
There would have been communism, and the life of people would have gone to a lower standard.
So was it worth the 54,246 men we lost there? What do you
Yes.
think? Okay, why?
Because
Okay, how about this? What made peace possible in 1953? Do you remember? Okay. No problem. We will move on to the why, which is Aspen. So tell me, Aspen, why was the president, your question, why was the president and the Joint Chiefs of Staff hesitant to contradict MacArthur's military judgment? Your first question, what had MacArthur done to get such a great reputation?
His judgment was vindicated when he was successful at Incheon.
Okay. Why didn't the Joint Chiefs want to contradict him?
Because his success was so unlikely and seemed impossible that they didn't know that if his further actions might be as successful as Incheon.
Okay. What happened to MacArthur's judgment after Incheon?
He got full of himself and thought that because of this one success, all of his ideas would also be successes.
Okay. And was he right? Is there no substitute for victory?
He is wrong. The number of casualties is a substitute.
Okay. And finally, why should civilians control the military? What's the biggest reason?
Because civilians are elected.
Okay. Very good. Now we'll move on to our debate. And our debate is over the chain of command. So the topic is, should a chain of command always be honored? Aspen's going to argue yes. If it doesn't, the system collapses. Marissa says no. Chains of command only stifle initiative and don't allow people to make decisions for themselves. So you each have 5 minutes to compose an opening statement. You may begin now.
Hello. Hi. What are you waiting for? What are you afraid of? You jump right in. Shooting video. You have a camera in your hand more than a book. Learn from my dad. He won't waste your time. Learn video production. My dad will teach you. You can do this.
Does anybody need more time? Are you ready to begin? Okay. So Aspen, yes, if it isn't, the system collapses. You have 2 minutes for your opening statement, beginning now.
The chain of command should always be followed because without it, many acts can be committed by military operations that have myopia, which means that they are only focused on the war. They are not focused on the international perspectives. A chain of command is put into process so that a civilian has control over the military, and the civilian is an elected person who has the opinions and the thoughts of the people behind them, so they have a more internationalist view. Therefore, it is important that they are listened to down the chain of command, because without it, acts like MacArthur, who wanted to contaminate enemy supplies with radioactive waste, which would have led to a war with China, which would have led to many casualties. If things like that would have happened if he did not follow the chain of command, many bad things would happen that aren't in the international view. They're in the view of his view of absolute victory. So the chain of command should always be followed, because without it, if the system collapses, many things may go in destruction, including our country, our economic state, and our military.
Okay. Marissa, no. You say chains of command only stifle initiative. You have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
No, chains of command shouldn't always be followed because it wastes time and it costs American lives. If we're worrying and going through the chains of command, there could be a war or a bombing, which would create more problems. There's also terrorists and people that are causing problems for America. And if we waste time going through the chain of commands, then they're out causing more problems for us, which creates more time having to go through the chain of commands. And also, not one person's decision is always the best. I feel like it's better to go through other people and not just them, and it wastes time. And if we don't always follow the chain of commands, then there's extra time to solve other things that we need to deal with, because one problem isn't always the biggest. And if we waste time going through one of them, then it's going to result in American lives, and there can be more deaths, which is going to affect all of us in the long term.
Okay, very good. Now to the counterpoints. So, Ms. Coates, you have said if it isn't, the system collapses and that we are in danger of rogue elements operating in our military. But let me tell you this. I'll ask you this for the counterpoint. The intelligence community before 9/11 was very much bound under a chain of command. And as a result of that, there were a lot of signals that were missed by intelligence communities because they were too afraid to take the initiative and follow some of these intelligence leads that might have prevented 9/11. So how do you square that with your belief that the chain of command should always be followed?
Well, in that case, it's a mistake of the chain of command. It's not something that should make it go down. It doesn't stifle initiative. It just gives it the group opinion, which means that there's more insight. But in that case, if they could have prevented 9/11, it would have been one case where they could have made something better. But in most situations, if a person does not follow the chain of command, it can only make war worse. Like, as Marissa said, she said that the chain of command stifles initiative. So, and that causes a loss of American lives. But what would lose more American lives? A 2-day wait to find what they are going to do in a war, or someone moving in an act that causes a World War III. It's in that certain case, initiative was not the most effective way to make a decision, but in most cases it is the most effective way.
Okay, Marissa, do you have a rebuttal to what Aspen said? You have 1 minute.
I think in that case it is the chain's fault, because they're going through a specific amount of rules and orders that they have to go through each time to get through things like 9/11 and bombings and stuff like that. And each time they have to go through the same things, and if we waste time like that, then again it's going to cause American lives. And if we could have prevented that, that could have saved a lot of people. And if we go through that every time, think about all the bombings and stuff that could happen to American lives and all the people who are working. If we could have just easily gone through it without the rules, sometimes it's easier to go through with your instinct instead of what you believe, I guess.
Okay. Very good. Now, your counterpoint, Marissa. Do you think there is such a thing as too much initiative? And I'll give you an example. This week, the U.S. military asked for a change in the rules of engagement because they want to be more aggressive in attacking the Taliban. And the president is now weighing those decisions. While he does, there may be several people that of interest that we want that are getting away. So should they wait on the president's order, or should they act on their own in Afghanistan? What do you think? You have 1 minute.
Well, I don't think there shouldn't be any order at all, but I think if we train our people well enough, they're able to make their own decisions instead of waiting for everybody else. And I feel like if we're able to do that and we trust America enough to train everybody, then I feel like it wouldn't be as big of a problem. And if we do have to wait for president or other people to make those decisions, we're just wasting more time, which can result in things like 9/11 and bombings and stuff, which we could be using to solve other problems.
Okay. Aspen, your rebuttal.
Civilians' control over the military is very important, and if the military makes their own decisions without the opinions or the initiative from people who are under rules that protect us, then many events can occur that aren't bad. It doesn't matter training. It's like many things, like MacArthur made his own decision for his trip at Incheon, which was successful, but he wanted to make more decisions with his judgment that would have been very unsuccessful. And so I think civilians control, because civilians have an international perspective. If you let the military, who are in the countries, who are myopic on the subject of the war, trying to win it, then decisions will not be as great as they would be if they had the input and the chain of command was followed.
Okay. Judge, you have your information. It's a debate Vietnam. No one's blinking. No one's backing down. So good. Now we will get to our quick draw round. Round one. Mr. Cisneros and Miss Gil Gonzalez. We've got our Tower of Power in front. Let's do an op check on that just to make sure they work. Okay, good. So we've got yellow we've got red and blue blinkers. Yeah. And I will, whoever rings in first, I will call on to answer these questions. So, let's do this for a quick draw. If we could get the first picture up for the students to ring in at. Wait. Okay, who am I?
Churchill.
Correct. Stand by. Wait, let me ask. Who am I? Alan?
Neville Chamberlain.
Next. What am I?
Reichstag.
Next. Who am I? Wait, okay. Who am I?
Hitler.
Next. Alan, who am I?
FDR.
Next. Alondra.
MacArthur.
Truman.
Back and forth. Next.
Kim Il-sung.
Correct. Okay, next.
Korean War.
Where specifically?
Incheon.
Good. What am I?
North Korea, South Korea.
Okay. Which is which?
The top one's North Korea and the bottom one's South Korea.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, we will move on to the next round, which is the Cuban Missile Crisis. So, Alondra, we will begin with you with the lightning round. Stand by. You will have 1 minute. Are you ready?
Yeah.
The year of the Cuban Missile Crisis.
1963.
They put nuclear weapons in Cuba.
Russia.
Cuba's leader at the time of the crisis.
Castro.
The U.S. president at the time of the crisis.
FDR.
The range of Soviet SS-4 missiles in Cuba.
Wait, the range at 15 minutes.
JFK assembled this group to meet the crisis.
XCOM.
Capital
Havana.
Cuba. Number of tracks, XCOM.
6.
Unbeknownst to Americans, Russian soldiers armed with these.
Nuclear weapons.
Define predicament.
Pass.
Define unprecedented.
Pass.
Define avid.
Eager.
Soviet leader at the time of the crisis.
Pass.
U.S. response time to a nuclear attack before missiles were put in Cuba.
15 minutes.
Response time after.
2 to 3 minutes.
JFK referred to the naval blockade as this.
Pass.
Track A called for doing this.
Nothing.
Track
Going
F.
and attacking.
If the U.S. invaded Cuba, probably the result.
We would all die.
Okay. Alan, we'll start with. Actually, go ahead. Yeah, keep that slide there. And Alan, I will start you with some of the questions that Alondra passed on. Okay, so are you ready for your 1 minute drill? We will start with define predicament.
Difficult situation.
Define unprecedented.
Never seen before.
JFK referred to the naval blockade as this.
Quarantine.
At the height of the crisis, the Russians shot down this American plane.
U-2.
The moral of the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Cooler heads prevail.
Define corrupt.
Dishonest.
Define reluctant.
Hesitant.
Define reconnaissance.
Information gathering. 12.
12 it is. Year Castro came to power.
1959.
He came up with the ultimate
Robert
solution.
Kennedy.
Part of the agreement, U.S. pledged to remove its missiles.
Turkey.
Okay, now we have our bonus questions. Define internationalist.
Person that's involved all around the world.
Capital of Mexico.
The DF.
Define, correct, define acquaintance.
Someone who knows, someone whom you know.
Define irate.
Annoyed.
Okay, very good. All right. I had to throw those bonus questions in for each side, as you saw, because you guys
No,
ran through
Mexico
those so
City, but
fast
it's called
today
the
when we were
Oh,
practicing.
I said it in Spanish.
I know.
But that's correct.
And it did. Okay, very good. I tell you what.
It was right, but it's
What's that?
Yeah, I said it still counts.
DF, right?
Yeah.
Federal District. Yes. Good. I got that much. I know enough Spanish for that much. Okay. Now, it's about as hot as Mexico City in the studio, too, isn't it? Boy, I tell you what. Yeah, good thing I wore a wool suit for this. Okay, now let's do our what if.
Oh, okay.
Alondra, we'll start with you. So, why did President Kennedy go on TV to announce the presence of nuclear missiles in Cuba? Why didn't he keep it secret? So, here are your questions. Why did Kennedy go public with news of the missiles?
So then nobody would freak out about it, and then we wouldn't be able to trust them.
What was the risk of going public with that information?
That we would all freak out.
What was the risk of keeping it secret?
We wouldn't trust our government anymore and turn on them.
Should governments be more open or more secretive with their people?
More secretive, or else they won't trust them and they might try to change their government's ways.
Can the government always control information?
No, because someone might take it out. If a worker goes out or something, they might get out and get twisted.
Okay, here's your what-if question, Alan. What if President Kennedy had taken the Joint Chiefs' advice to invade Cuba? First of all, how would this attack have been launched? What plan did the Joint Chiefs have?
Full-on invasion. The Marines would have been launched onto the island, and they would have invaded.
Okay. What would the Russians have done in response, do you think?
They would have launched their nuclear missiles because they were far away, and that was a choice to do.
What would we have done in response to that?
We would have launched our nuclear missiles, and it would be World War III, and it would be a nuclear war.
Okay. Why didn't Kennedy take his general's advice?
Because he had empathy for the country, and he had the perspective of not going to war, and as the others they were military people, and they just knew war, whereas he knew diplomatic situations, and he knew everything else.
What did the Joint Chiefs assure Kennedy the Russians would not do if we invaded?
He assured them that they would not launch their nuclear missiles.
Okay. Now, we will move on to our debate. Are group decisions better than individual ones? Alondra, you say no. Group decisions lead to paralysis by analysis. Alan, you say yes. Groups will always make better decisions than individuals. You have 5 minutes to prepare your opening statement starting now.
It's all about the craft of gathering the elements to tell a good story. I try to build my students' confidence as the program builds. And I think it's important to network as soon as you can. I mean, when you start the program, start making contact.
Here we go. So, Alondra, you will go first. You have 2 minutes to deliver your opening statement, beginning now.
We should not make group decisions because paralysis and analysis, because in that meantime that we are taking forever to, like Marissa said in her topic, if we might kill more civilian lives than our army ones. There could also be many biased decisions, saying maybe someone in our group could be thinking that the ways that we are living our government are bad, and they have a controlled mindset saying, oh, this is bad, we have to change it, and have biased decisions. We should, instead of fighting each other, we should be fighting the enemy. In that time, our enemy, like someone could say it to our enemy, and enemy could attack, and during those times, things would go wrong.
Okay. Alan, you say yes. Groups will always make better decisions than individuals. Begin your opening statement now.
Groups will always make better decisions in every way than individuals, because there's this thing known as myopia, as Aspen said in her previous debate, that some people they just wanted to attack, but some people just wanted to be diplomatic in those situations, and they wanted to compromise. And John F. Kennedy in that situation needed all the input that he needed to make the right decision instead of his decision, which probably could have been do nothing or full-on invasion, which was the wrong choice. So, and if you do just one individual, it's a dictatorship, pretty much. That's what it is. And you could end up in situations far worse than what we had in the missile crisis. We could end up in situations like World War II, which was a dictatorship like with Hitler. And we could end up in situations like in Korea with Kim Jong-un. And so, would you rather take longer for your decision with groups, or would you rather make the right decision and prevent people from being killed, and it prevents wars and prevents money from being lost, casualties? It prevents a lot of things with group decisions instead of just paralysis by analysis. What is that? Just wasting time. It doesn't really mean anything in terms of your people under your government.
Okay. Alondra, your counterpoints. You are supporting the idea that individuals make decisions better than groups. So the tipping point, I'll give you this example. The tipping point of Adolf Hitler's success was when the German army swore personal loyalty to him rather than to Germany. So there is one man, an individual, making all the decisions in Germany, and yet, of course, they ended up bringing the country and Europe and most of the world to ruin. So given that, how do you defend your position that individual decisions are better? You have 1 minute.
Well, see, during those Nazi times with Hitler, he was surrounded by lunatics like him. So when he made decisions, he also consulted his group that were just like him, ignorant and irrelevant. They made bad decisions that caused everyone to die. If we go into some dictatorships aren't always bad. There could be leaders that are doing good for our country, and that could be something. In Kennedy's decision, that decision came out good. Even though he didn't have military experience, he saw the civilian side and saw what could come out better than what our trained soldiers could do.
Alan, your rebuttal, 1 minute.
Well, you pretty much just argued for mine because you said groups make better decisions, and in times where individuals make decisions, they're usually on the percentage side, they make bad decisions like Hitler did. Tell me a time where one individual made a good decision, whereas a group made a better decision.
Okay. Alan, your counterpoint? The Joint Chiefs of Staff that you have mentioned advised Kennedy to invade Cuba, and he declined their advice. Now, collectively, those men had 150 years of military experience. Kennedy had 2 years commanding a PT boat as a Navy lieutenant, as a junior officer. So how can you say that, and he ended up making the right decision, of course, because he went against that 150 years of military decisions. So given the fact that he probably made the right call in 1962, how can you say that groups will always make better decisions? You have 1 minute, go.
Groups, in that case, maybe some people in that group said to fully invade. That's because they were in myopia, like Aspen said, because they were in the military, so they wanted to attack. But John F. Kennedy had empathy for the civilians there, and he had diplomatic experience, which was the one that prevailed in that situation. And so since he had empathy in that situation, he wanted the choice that would not kill as many people, and it would create peace instead of hard power that would be a full invasion, and it would hurt a lot of people, waste a lot of money, and it would just be bad for the entire economy of both countries.
Okay. That 1 minute.
No.
Alondra, your rebuttal.
You're saying that those group decisions were bad for our country. It basically, sometimes group decisions don't really work out. Things can go very bad. So I don't really know what you're trying to say here. I've heard stories of different people that sometimes those group decisions can go wrong, and more experienced people have, I guess, a fixed mindset on when things going on in crises that can cost many people's lives. Like, I'm trying to remember on Elise's topic where it says that instead of the group decision that the Kennedy's people were making was that we should go and attack and get it all over with. But I feel like in bringing back to Annalise's topic, Kennedy did the right choice because he tried to let them cool down and talk with them and see what we could compromise to instead of going all full war.
Okay. Now, 3 down, 2 topics to go. Daniel, the end of the Cold War, your 1 minute lightning round. Are you ready?
Yes.
Here we go. What does SDI stand for?
Strategic Defense Initiative.
What was SDI designed to protect against?
Russian missiles.
The Soviet leader came to power in 1985.
Gorbachev.
What was Glasnost?
To open up.
What was Perestroika?
Rebuild.
What did MAD stand for?
Mutual assured destruction.
In 1983, British were getting critical information from this source.
KGB spy.
Reagan.
What did he call the Soviet Union?
Evil Empire.
What did a Russian pilot
Korean
shoot?
passenger plane.
NATO stands for this?
North Atlantic Treaty Association.
Define pummel.
Organization. Beat down.
Define proxy.
Substitute.
Define refute.
Prove wrong.
The 1970s
Detente.
policy. What?
Detente.
Oh, all right, very good. All right, Soviets thought this NATO exercise was a prelude to war.
Pass.
Reagan and Gorbachev first met here for a summit in 1985.
Geneva.
This 1987 treaty abolished.
INF.
What did Reagan do after the British warned him of Soviet concerns?
Rhetoric.
What did he do with his rhetoric?
He toned down.
Okay, very good. All right. AJ, we'll start with, you can keep the slides there, and we'll just start with a couple that Daniel passed on. AJ, you ready? Here we go. You have 1 minute. What is NATO stands for this?
Pass.
The Soviets thought this NATO exercise was a prelude to war in '83.
Pass.
How big was the Soviet Union's economy compared to the United?
1/4.
Reagan's policy to end the Cold War?
We win, they lose.
Gorbachev wanted Reagan to confine SDI to this.
The laboratory.
At their 1986 summit, Reagan and Gorbachev agreed to reduce their arsenals to this number?
100.
The year the Berlin Wall fell.
1989.
Define skepticism.
Doubt.
Define analogy.
Comparison.
Define rhetoric.
A special kind of language.
Next, bonus points. Capital France.
Paris.
Define persistently.
Continuously.
Define charismatic.
Pass.
Critics of SDI called it this.
Pass.
Okay. All right. Now, we will go to our what-if question for Mr. Brown. What if the British had not been running Oleg Gordievsky, the KGB spy you mentioned, as an agent in 1985? What would have been the most likely consequences? So, let me ask you this. Okay, well, who was Gordievsky? You've already identified him. Do you know where he was stationed? Just a little bonus point.
No.
Okay. What information was he providing the British?
Information on the nuclear weapons.
Okay. Can you give me specifically, we talked about a couple of examples of what he was ordered to watch. Do you remember what those were?
No.
Okay. How about this? What did the British do with this information?
They told us.
Okay. What did Reagan do as a result of this information?
Tone down his way he was like rhetoric.
Okay. And what would have been the consequences if we had not had that information? What do you think would have happened?
World War III or nuclear war.
Okay. Now we will go to AJ. Why did President Reagan believe there was an irreconcilable difference? There's that word again. Between the United States and the Soviet Union. So I'll ask you this. What system at the time did the Soviet Union exist under?
Communist.
Okay. Why was this system so offensive to American ideals?
Because it went against everything that that we believe in, such as communism is where everybody gets gets the same amount of money, while in America everybody gets different amount of money for how much they earn and how much they work. And communism, their leaders are born under leadership, while in America we vote.
Okay, very good. What had the Soviet Union traditionally supported around the world that we opposed?
They wanted they wanted kind of world equality, but they just wanted to have everybody be equal, like world communism.
Okay. How did most people at the time look at the Cold War ending? When they looked at it in the 1980s, what did they see? How did they envision it ending?
Well, when the Berlin Wall fell, everybody was excited, especially in Germany. They were happy how the Berlin Wall fell and how now communism was no longer in Germany. And a lot of people thought that a lot of people saw it as Russia being defeated.
Okay, and how did Reagan end the Cold War, finally? His grand strategy mentioned we win, they lose, but what was the final outcome with SDI used as a bargaining chip to do what?
Shoot.
Okay. We'll move on to our debate. The debate is, are America's responsibilities around the world exceptional? Daniel, you're going to say yes, the world's peace and prosperity rest on American power. AJ, you're going to argue the opposite. No, we cannot be the world's policeman. You have 5 minutes. to come up with your opening statement starting now. Okay, so you say the world's peace and prosperity rest on American power. Tell me now, in 2 minutes, why?
The world's peace and power represents. Okay, so Americans should be the world's policemen because we're the only ones who can do counterinsurgency. And for those of you guys who don't know what counterinsurgency is protecting the population. And if you protect the population, then you can get info from them about people who might be bad people. Plus, we wanted to prevent genocide. Genocide is just killing innocent people. We don't want another Holocaust to happen, like in World War II. We also have the biggest economy, so we can afford it. We can help them with all their struggles. We want to intervene. We want to help them. Innocent people shouldn't be dying for no reason. Yeah.
Okay. AJ, no, you say. We cannot be the world's policeman. Tell me why in 2 minutes.
Well, like my colleague Calder said, we can't speak or govern for every country. America has their own problems to deal with, and not every country wants help. We can be a kind of idol for all the countries, like how we have capitalism and how we have our, our minds together and how we have a good government. But at the same time, we can't afford to get any more casualties whenever we're going into wars like the Vietnam War. We can't go into wars that have nothing to do with us and just say, oh, hey, we're going to help this country because we want to. I mean, if it was going to be threatened to become a World War III, then I could see that, like how Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. And we got involved in World War II because we physically got attacked. So I could see if we're getting attacked and then we join another war and we become the world's policeman. But at the same time, if a certain war has nothing to do with us, or even a country's problems has nothing to do with us, we're not the world's babysitters. So we can't just go around saying, hey, we want you to be capitalist, so we're going to start a war with you. Every country has their own leader for a reason. Their country's leaders can handle things the way that they handle them, like I've said before, unless if it's going to start a World War III or a war that's going to involve us. We shouldn't be involved in any kind of wars because of the casualties we'll gain. More people are going to die, and more blood's going to be on America's hands.
Okay. Daniel, your counterpoint. You mentioned genocide. This year marks the 20th anniversary of the deployment of U.S. troops to Bosnia, the first time that U.S. military personnel were specifically committed to prevent a genocide or to stop a genocide between Bosnians and Serbians, specifically Serbians killing Bosnians for their religion. But you have argued in favor of that position. But why should the fact that two people 6,000 miles away can't get along with each other, why is that our business? Why should we care if they're killing each other? Why should we have cared in Bosnia? Why should we have cared in Rwanda? Why should we have cared in Cambodia? All the modern instances of genocide since World War II. Why is that in American interests to stop? You have a minute.
We should have cared because if we wouldn't have intervened, then all those people would have died and it would have become genocide and it would have been like another Holocaust where all the Jews died. And that's not a good thing that we want. So we should intervene and help those people who are also defenseless and can't fend for themselves.
Okay. Your rebuttal, AJ. You have 1 minute beginning now.
I hate to sound heartless, but why should we care about other people who are being killed? They're not in our country. America has their own problems to deal with. I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. Not only that, it's in another country. It has nothing to do with us personally. I mean, I just had a good point. But
You have over 30 seconds to find it.
all right, well, let's go with Donald Trump. We have Donald Trump to deal with.
Oh, you knew it was going to come up sooner or later, people. You knew it was going to happen.
We have Donald Trump to deal with. We have to get America involved in that. But while our troops are out there fighting a war that doesn't involve us, now that we're in Iraq, I can understand how we're there because they personally threatened to harm us. But if we're out fighting other wars,
5 seconds.
there's no point.
Okay. AJ, counterpoint to you, saying we cannot be the world's policeman. This year, or this week actually, President Obama ended a 40-year arms embargo against Vietnam because what the Vietnamese wanted to do is they are worried about China and they're worried about Chinese expansionism. So they're actually looking at us as a potential ally. So Vietnam is communist in theory. China is communist in theory. Those two should be allies. Instead, the Vietnamese trust us more than the Chinese. So if we do withdraw our influence from around the world, doesn't that just mean that bad actors like China and Russia and Iran will step in and will actually make the situation worse? Isn't America's influence better than theirs? You have 1 minute.
Yes, America's influence is better than theirs. But as I keep saying, if it doesn't have to deal with us, then why should we be babysitting other countries now that Vietnam is looking to us, and if they ask us for help, then we can kind of make a treaty with them. But either way, they're communist, and if America is going against Russia because, well, if they're not friends nor enemies with Russia, then why are we going to be friends nor enemies with Vietnam? Now that we fought for them but we lost is another thing. But at the same time, like I keep saying, there's no point in fighting it if it has nothing to do with us. But if it escalates, then maybe we could step in.
Okay, Daniel, your response, 1 minute, go.
So if we don't help them, then it hurts us more because then they trust others more than we do. So they're going to go talk to other people who will have more trust than them. So they'll go to them and they'll have more power in that situation than we will. And we have to respect the right that they trust us, and we have to help them if they're in a situation in need.
Okay. Hallelujah. We're up to our last unit. Cleanup hitters. Here we go. Stand by. Hayden, you are going to go first with your lightning round for 1 minute. Are you ready?
Indeed.
Here we go. He ruled Iraq from 1979 to 2000.
Hussein.
What does WMD stand for?
Mass destruction.
Iraq is about the same size as this U.S. state?
California.
Coin stands for this.
Counterinsurgencies.
He ran against
John Kerry.
Tribune supporter.
Paris.
Okay. Try and keep up. Define topple.
Fell over.
This department put in charge of Iraq's post-war.
Department of Defense.
The number of Americans killed in the invasion of Iraq?
139.
Number of Americans killed post-war insurgency?
4,000.
Define pilfered.
Stolen.
Hussein used poison gas against this ethnic minority in Iraq?
The Kurds.
Good. So Hayden, Seattle Times endorsed Kerry because he felt it would end this?
Military occupation in Iraq.
He was appointed the U.S. Administrator of Iraq.
Pass.
Define gruesome.
Gory.
The insurgency began here in 2003?
The Sunni Triangle.
Okay. Very good. All right, Owen, are you ready? Okay, you know what? I'm not sure what the order is going to be on this. Just follow my verbal cues, because I think I have these out of order. But we're going to start with, let's see, did he pass on anything? Okay, we're going to start where Hayden left off, and then continue. I should have this right. Okay, are you ready? Owen?
Yep.
He passed on one. Yeah. And then I think that's the only one. Okay, so we'll start on that. Are you ready, Owen? Okay. He was appointed U.S. Administrator of Iraq.
Paul Bremer.
Preferred weapon of the Iraqi insurgents.
IEDs.
President Bush adopted this policy, sending more troops to Iraq in 2007.
Pass.
Saddam Hussein's political party.
Ba'ath Party.
He led the counterinsurgency efforts in Iraq.
David Petraeus.
Define calibrated.
Adjusted.
Paul Bremer's biggest mistake.
Not becoming allies with the Iraqi army.
The number of Iraqis killed in the insurgency.
60,000.
Support for the Iraq War began to decline and was discovered Saddam did not have these.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Define viable.
It's a usable and good solution.
President Bush's ultimate goal was to establish this in Iraq.
Democratic. Go.
Okay, our bonus. Capital of Iraq.
Pass.
Okay. Capital of Egypt.
Pass.
Define traumatized.
Hurt mentally or physically.
Okay. Give me an example of WMD.
Let's
Little bonus one I'm throwing out there.
like a bomb, a suicide bomb, or
Define abducted.
kidnapped.
Okay. Now we will go to our final what if and why section. So Hayden, what if President Bush had not ordered the surge in Iraq in 2003? What would have been the most likely consequences? I'll open by saying what was happening in Iraq in 2003.
There was a civil war going on in Iraq at the time.
I'm sorry, say that again.
There was a civil war in Iraq.
Okay. Can you list two consequences of the surge had it not been ordered?
More American lives would have been lost, and more Iraqi lives would have been lost.
Okay. Bonus point, can you tell me, in that civil war, which two Islamic factions were fighting each other?
The Ba'ath Party, and I don't know the other one.
Okay. So, therefore what? Why was the surge a success?
The surge was a success because we were able to make sure that Iraq didn't have any weapons of mass destruction, and that the American lives were safe back at home, and that we were able to function without working in Iraq, but making sure really just to knock out that factor of the weapon of mass destruction.
Okay. Owen, are you ready?
Yep.
Here we go. Why did it take 4 years for the military to find an effective strategy in Iraq? So we'll begin with this. What strategy did the U.S. military begin with in Iraq in 2003?
They're using hard power. They were basically launching bombs, shooting at basically everyone they see that doesn't look like an American army.
Okay. Why didn't this strategy work for 4 years?
Because they weren't connecting with the public. They weren't using counterinsurgency, which is protect the local population. The population needed to trust them in order to and give them intel on where they think terrorists might be hiding.
Okay. And you mentioned this in lightning round, but I'll ask it again, who implemented that new strategy in Iraq?
David Petraeus.
Okay. Our final debate of the night. We'll do this, and then we will have one more quick draw round. So, here's our question. What's the best way to fight radical Islam? Hayden, you say with hard power. Military force is the only thing our enemies respect. Owen, you say no. In fact, soft power works better. Diplomatic and economic solutions offer the best chance of success. You have 5 minutes to begin your opening statement. Go.
What's there to be afraid of?
I've never done this before.
I had no idea what it was going to be like.
I didn't even know how to turn on a computer.
Success requires facing your fears. I empower my students from day one.
We jumped right in, shooting.
I was excited from the start.
You have a camera in your hand more than a book.
And that's how you will learn. From start to finish, I don't waste your time.
It begins easy, then it gets harder and harder and harder.
I didn't think I could keep up, but then I got good.
I realized I can do this. Confidence is the goal. I love it when they see their potential.
I see myself doing professional work.
This is something I really enjoy.
I can see a story in everyone.
I'm not teaching video production. I'm creating storytellers.
Our answers in. So, celebrity judge, this will be your last tour of duty for these next 3 sections. Hayden, we begin with you. Hard power is the only way to fight radical Islam. 2 minutes. Tell me now. Go.
All right. As my esteemed colleague Calder said, you can only fight these people who support radical Islam with hard power because that's the only thing they'll listen to. If you come and fight them with the same power that they use, and you use more power than them because America has the most powerful army in all of the world right now, if you use more power than them and show them really who is boss and the right way to do things, they will end up respecting you and they will stop their fight. The problem is commonly the public will think to withdraw and try and calm down and as my grandpa always said, sit down and have a cup of coffee with them and talk with them. But that doesn't work in this sort of situation because you have to show them who is boss so they will sit down and have a conversation with you and sort of understand that they cannot come out and attack these U.S. citizens because this is America and that will not go.
Okay. Strong words. Owen, soft power. You disagree with Mr. Brightsman? 2 minutes. Tell me why.
I disagree with him because David Petraeus came up with a strategy called of coin, and that it's going to protect the local population. And if we protect the local population instead of like what Hayden said, it's just blow them off the face of the earth, we'll get inside the local population, and they will trust us, so they will tell us where they are like stationed and where they are working from, which will lead to us knowing more in less civilian lives instead of what Hayden is thinking and just throwing a bomb somewhere and hoping that it will get the army.
Okay. Hayden, counterpoint. We've talked about this occasionally in class, and it happened in Iraq. What about mission creep? That is, the military was assigned a task of invading and conquering Iraq, which they did in 3 weeks' time, at the cost of only 139 KIA. As we've also talked about in this section, it was the insurgency that lasted another 6 years after that took the lives of 4,000 Americans. So certainly more than we anticipated committing. Then that violence spills over into Syria, once we withdraw from Iraq, probably into Lebanon. So does that mean we have to go into every country where instability threatens? Syria, for example, with the refugee crisis. Does that mean we are committed to go there as well to stop that crisis? Maybe Turkey, maybe Lebanon. Where does it end? You have 1 minute to respond.
It indeed does. We need to keep going into an area and invade an area until American citizens' lives are not at risk anymore. And to touch on his point that he made of the counterinsurgencies, they'll sit down and listen if you establish a friendship with them. Yes, that may happen, but as you witnessed firsthand when the man gave you information, it turned right around and it bit him because whoever was there and whoever was a threat to him now probably retaliated against him, and he is probably no longer in the most ideal state. So trying to reason with them before they understand who's boss and who will come and get them is not the most ideal situation.
Okay, by not ideal you mean dead.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
That is not ideal. You're correct.
Yeah.
Okay, the counterpoint, Owen, to soft power. Last week, a report emerged from Iraq that ISIS had taken 20-plus Iraqis they believe collaborated with us and with the Iraqi government and dipped them in nitric acid until their organs dissolved. That was their special form of execution. Given the fact that that's the enemy, isn't Hayden right? Isn't a knife in the throat what they need more?
Not
than
necessarily
a talk?
because.
You have a minute.
Not necessarily because, like what AJ was saying, we got our information from those people. We got the information that we needed, and it may sound not good, but we don't really care about them after that. They gave us the information that we needed, and also, even if we just drop a bomb, not only were we killing civilians, just like in Hiroshima when the U.S. dropped the atomic bomb on Japan, there was there's still effects from cancers from the radiation caused by the bomb.
Hayden, your rebuttal.
Well, as you said, establishing a friendship with them is our key point so that they will give us information. Establishing a friendship and then turning around and killing them. That's the point he is touching on. That's the point he wants to make here. He's going against himself in this situation due to the fact that he's saying we need to fight them with soft power, but turning around and letting them die immediately is okay.
Okay, by the way, Judge, did I Did you get a counterpoint to his? No. Did we miss that? Okay, all right. Let me go back to that. I thought I skipped that. Sorry. Okay, so the counterpoint was mission creep, and I forgot to give you your rebuttal to him, didn't I? Is that right, Judge? Okay, so sorry, but in a minute again, mission creep, as I gave you the counterpoint, and then I'd forgotten Owen's rebuttal for a minute. So state that again, and Owen, you'll have 1 minute to respond to him.
Okay,
go
mission
ahead.
creep should go on until American citizens' lives are not at risk and they don't have a chance to attack more American citizens. And then he touched on the point of he said something about creating friendships, and I said so, like, you have to establish those friendships, and then when the guy established the friendship and he told you the information, he ended up dead because whatever he said wasn't liked by the people who he was telling it about, and they turned around and killed him immediately.
Okay, now your rebuttal to that, Owen, for 1 minute. Begin.
Okay, but if you're saying killing him and saying we don't really care anymore is wrong for me, what you're arguing with hard power is just blow them up right away. And you could be hurting the local population, and they're just gone. And with our strategy, we don't know if they'll get killed. It's after they have talked to us, and it was not by an American army who killed them. In your case, it's an American bomber just coming in, blowing up a certain area, and killing parts of the local population. And with counterinsurgency, it's talking to the local people, and then coming off their information, but we don't know what will happen to them in the future.
Okay, Judge, do you have everything you need? All right, Your Honor. So now the last thing we have to do. He's a judge, right? Your Honor, Your Honor. Okay, are we ready? This is the last thing we have to do. So, and that is our last quick draw round. So, quick draw McGraw. Okay, Alondra, you're blue, right?
Yes.
Okay. If we are ready, then who are we?
Fidel Castro.
Alan? Fidel Castro and who?
And Khrushchev.
Okay. Who am I?
Oh.
Okay. Who am I? Or what am I?
The nuclear site that the Russians kept their missiles in Cuba.
Okay. Who am I?
Reagan.
What? She did that before you said, who am I?
Yeah.
What? The whole time.
Okay, hang on. We'll go next.
No, I haven't.
Who am I? Alan.
That is Gorbachev.
Correct. Okay. All right. Remember, no help from your other teammates. Okay, next.
Yeah.
What am I?
The Berlin Wall.
That is correct. Okay, next. Wait. You rang in. Okay, let me say what am I first. Hang on.
Sorry.
Hang on. Okay. I'll reset. What am I?
Estia.
Correct. Next. Wait. Let me say it.
His name.
Let me say it. Who am I?
Saddam Hussein.
Oh,
Okay.
dang it.
Next. Wait. Who am I? Alan.
David Petraeus.
That is David Petraeus. Next. Where am I?
Ramadi.
Okay, that is correct. All right, we are done. Celebrity judge, if you will give me your score sheet. Okay, we will have an answer shortly.
Hello. Hi. What are you waiting for? What are you afraid of? You jump right in. Shooting video. You have a camera in your hand more than a book. Learn from my dad. He won't waste your time. Learn video production. My dad will teach you. You can do this.
Okay, well, the debate was tied 47 to 47. However, no, strictly the debate, so it goes down to lightning round, and it goes down to what if and why, and it goes down to quick draw McGraw. So, coming in the lead, the winners with 148 points, Annalisa, Aspen, Alan, Daniel Owen. Calder's team 130 points. You gave it the old college try, so well done. I want to thank our audience and thank the production crew here at DPS TV, and everyone have a good night.